it! Get into it! Yes! We're back, lovelies. We're back. Hello, hello. Welcome to Storytime with Chris. Like I always say, you don't have to watch these stories when they go live. You're more than welcome to watch them in your downtime, nap time, max and relax and chillaxing time, in between time, meme time, scheme time, in between time, lunchtime, break time, study time, CP time, any time that you want to hear a highly animated voice bring you wonderful stories of magic, adventure, science fiction, fantasy, and many, many more in between. So we're back. Took a break for Thanksgiving. I hope everybody had a lovely Thanksgiving with their family or their chosen family. You know, I want everybody to have a good time around the holidays. I don't think anybody should be left without on the holidays. Now, in years past, I typically would open up my home to people who can't be with their families for the holidays and cook a big Thanksgiving meal. Last year and this year was different. Last year I went to Cleveland for Thanksgiving and helped cook. And then this year I helped create the Thanksgiving meal with me and my grandma. So, yeah. Because she had already had the turkey started and the cornbread dressing started before I got there. But once I got there, I started doing the prep, cutting up the collard greens, cutting up the cheese for the macaroni and cheese, boiling the noodles and packaging those up, cutting out fruit and veg and all sorts of assortment of things to make sure that the holiday would go off without a hitch. And it was so much fun. Me and my family had a great time. It was awesome. Shout out to everybody that I got to see. Dad, Uncle Paul, Pete, Desmond, Tyreek, Dominique, Kyle, Lupe, Gigi, Grandma, Vicky, so many amazing, wonderful, Josh, so many amazing, wonderful, bubbly people, Monty, Pam, just who had so much fun and were genuine about it, you know what I mean? My mom says it best. She said, you don't need a whole lot of time to make memories. It could be a few minutes, maybe an hour, maybe a couple hours. But that time that you do spend, that is what matters. Just wanted to get that off my chest. Now, let's go ahead and get started, because you know my glasses are filthy, children. I have to make sure that they're presentable. There we go. Now I can see. All right. Chapter 11. If you've ever dressed up for Halloween or attended a masquerade, you already know that there's a certain thrill to wearing a disguise. Which is true, there is. A thrill that is half excitement and half danger. I once attended one of the famed masked balls hosted by the Duchess of Winnipeg, and it was one of the most exciting and dangerous evenings of my life. I was disguised as a bullfighter and slipped into the party while being pursued by the palace guards, who were disguised as scorpions. The moment I entered the grand ballroom, I felt as if Lemony Snicket had disappeared. I was wearing clothes I had never worn before, a scarlet cape made of silk, and a vest embroidered with a gold thread and a skinny black mask, and it made me feel as if I were a different person. I dared to approach a woman I had been forbidden to approach for the rest of my life. She was alone on the veranda. The word veranda is a fancy term for a porch made of polished gray marble and costumed as a dragonfly with a glittery green mask and enormous silvery wings. As my pursuers scurried around the party trying to guess which guest was me, I slipped out into the veranda and gave her the message I'd been trying to give her for 15 long and lonely years. Beatrice, I cried, just as the scorpion spotted me. Count Olaf is... I cannot go on. It makes me weep to think of that evening and of the dark and desperate times that followed. And in the meantime, I'm sure you're curious what happened to the Baudelaire orphans and the Quagmire triplets after dinner that evening at Proof Rock Prep. This is sort of exciting, Duncan said, putting Class's glasses on his face. I know that we're doing this for serious reasons, but I'm excited anyway. Isadora recited, tying Violet's ribbon in her hair. It may not be particularly wise, but it's a thrill to be disguised. That's not a perfect poem, but it will do under the circumstances. How do we look? The Baudelaire orphans took a step back and regarded the Quagmires carefully. It was just after dinner, and the children were standing outside the orphan shack, hurriedly putting their risky plan into action. They had managed to sneak into the cafeteria and steal a sunny-sized bag of flour from the kitchen while the metal-masked cafeteria workers' backs were turned. Violet had also snitched a fork, a few teaspoons of creamed spinach, and a small potato, all of which were needed for her invention. Now they had just a few moments before the Baudelaires, or in this case the Quagmires in disguise, had to show up for SOAR. Duncan and Isadora handed over their notebooks so the Baudelaires could study for their comprehensive exams, and switched shoes so the Quagmires' laps would sound exactly like the Baudelaires'. Now, with only seconds to spare, the Baudelaires looked over the Quagmire's disguise and realized instantly just how risky this plan was. Isadora and Duncan Quagmire simply did not look very much like Violet and Klaus and Baudelaire. Duncan's eyes were of a different color from Klaus's, and Isadora had different hair from Violet's. Even if it was tied up in a similar way, being triplets, the Quagmires were the same exact size and height. But Violet was taller than Klaus because she was older, and there was no time to make small stilts for Isadora to mimic this height difference, but it wasn't really these small physical details that made the disguise so unconvincing. It was the simple fact that the Baudelaires and the Quagmires were different people, and a hair ribbon and a pair of glasses and some shoes couldn't turn them into one another any more than a woman disguised as a dragonfly can actually take wing and escape the disaster awaiting her. I know we don't look much like you, Duncan admitted, after the Baudelaires had been quiet for some time. But remember, it's quite dark on the front lawn. The only light is coming from the luminous circle. We'll make sure to keep our heads down when we're running so our faces won't give us away. We won't speak a word to Coach Genghis so our voices won't give us away. We have your hair, ribbon, glasses, and shoes so our accessories won't give us away either.
We don't have to go through with this plan, Violet said quietly. We appreciate your help, but we don't have to try and fool Coach Genghis. My siblings and I could just run away right now, tonight. We've gotten to be pretty good runners, so we'd have a good head start on Coach Genghis.
We could call Mr. Poe from a payphone somewhere, Klaus said. Zobo, Sunny said, which meant, or attend a different school under different names.
Those plans don't have a chance of working, Isadora said. From what you've told us about Mr. Poe, he's never very helpful. And Count Olaf seems to find you wherever you go, so a different school wouldn't help either.
This is our only chance, Duncan agreed. If you pass the exams without arousing Genghis's suspicion, you'll be out of danger, and then we can focus our efforts on exposing the coach for who he really is.
I suppose you're right, Violet said. I just don't like the idea of you putting your lives in such danger just to help us. What are friends for? Isadora said. We're not going to attend some silly recital while you run laps to your doom. You three were the first people at Proof Round Prep who weren't mean to us just for being orphans. None of us have any family, so we gotta stick together.
At least let us go with you to the front lawn, Klaus said. We'll spy on you from the archway and make sure you're fooling Coach Genghis. Duncan shook his head. You don't have time to spy on us, he said. You have to make staples out of those metal rods and study for 2 comprehensive exams.
Oh, Isadora said suddenly, how will we drag this bag of flour along the track? We need a string or something.
We could just kick it around the circle. No, Klaus said. If Coach Genghis thinks you're kicking your baby sister, he'll know something is up.
I know, Violet said.
She leaned forward and put her hand on Duncan's chest, running her fingers along his thick wool sweater until she found what she was looking for. A loose thread. Carefully, she pulled, unraveling the sweater slightly until she had a good long piece of yarn. Then she snapped it off, tied one end around the bag of flour, the other end she handed to Duncan.
This should do it, she said. Sorry about your sweater.
I'm sure you could invent a sewing machine, he said, when we're all out of danger. Well, we'd better go. Isadora, Coach Genghis will be waiting. Good luck with studying.
Good luck with running laps, Klaus said. The Baudelaires took a long look at their friends. They were reminded of the last time they saw their parents, waving goodbye to them as they left for the beach. They had not known, of course, that it would be the last moment they would spend with their mother and father, and again, each of the Baudelaires had gone back to the day in their lives, wishing that they had said something more than a casual goodbye. Violet, Klaus, and Sunny looked at the 2 triplets and hoped that this was not such a time when people they cared for would disappear from their lives forever. But what if it were? If we never see... Violet stopped, swallowed, and began again. If something goes wrong... Duncan took Violet's hands and looked right at her. Violet saw behind Klaus's glasses the serious look in Duncan's wide eyes. Nothing will go wrong, he said firmly, though of course he was wrong at that very moment. Nothing will go wrong at all. We'll see you in the morning, Baudelaires. Isadora nodded solemnly and followed her brother and the bag of flour away from the orphan's shack. The Baudelaire orphans watched them walk toward the front lawn until the triplets were merely two specks dragging another speck along with them. You know, Klaus said as they watched them, from a distance in the dim light, they look quite a bit like us.
Apex,
Sunny agreed.
I hope so, Violet murmured. I hope so. But in the meantime, we better stop thinking about them and get started on our half of the plan. Let's put our noisy shoes on and go into the shack.
I can't imagine how you're going to make staples, Klaus said, with only a fork, a few teaspoons of creamed spinach, and a small potato. That sounds more like the ingredients for a side dish than for a staple-making machine. I hope your inventing skills haven't been dulled by a lack of sleep.
I don't think they have, Violet said. It's amazing how much energy you can have once you have a plan. Besides, my plan doesn't only involve the things I snitched. It involves one of the orphan shack crabs and our noisy shoes. Now, when we all have our shoes on, please follow my instructions.
The two younger Baudelaires were quite puzzled at this, but they had learned long ago that when it comes to inventions, Violet could be trusted absolutely. In the recent past, she had invented a grappling hook, a lockpick, and a signaling device. And now, come hell or high water, an expression which here means using a fork, a few teaspoons of creamed spinach, and a small potato, a live crab, and noisy shoes, she was going to invent a staple-making machine. The three siblings put on their shoes and, following Violet's instructions, entered the shack. As usual, the tiny crabs were lounging around, taking advantage of their time alone in the shack when they wouldn't be frightened by loud noises, or most occasions the Baudelaires would stop wildly on the floor when they would enter the shack, and the crabs would scurry underneath the bales of hay into other hiding places in the room. This time, however, Violet instructed her siblings to step on the floor in carefully erased patterns so as to herd one of the grumpiest and biggest clawed crabs into the corner of the shack. While the other crabs scattered, this crab was trapped in a corner, afraid of the noisy shoes, but with nowhere to hide from them.
Good work, Violet cried. Keep them in the corner, Sonny, while I ready the potato.
What is the potato for? Klaus asked.
As we know,
Violet explained as Sonny trapped her little feet this way and that to keep the crab in the corner.
These crabs love to get their claws on our toes. I specifically snitched a potato that was toe-shaped. You see how it's curved in a sort of oval way, and the little bumpy part here looks like a toenail?
You're right, Klaus said. The resemblance is remarkable, but what does it have to do with staples?
Well, the metal rods that Nero gave us are very long and need to be cut cleanly into small, staple-sized pieces. While Sonny keeps the crab in the corner, I'm going to wave the potato at him. Or he or she. Come to think of it, I don't know how to tell a boy crab from a girl crab.
It's a boy, Klaus said. Trust me.
Well, he'll think it's a toe, Violet continued, and snap at it with his claws. At that instant, I'll yank the potato away and put a rod in its place. If I do it carefully enough, the crab should do a perfect job of slicing it up.
And then what? Klaus asked.
First things first, Violet replied firmly. Okay, Sonny, keep tapping those noisy shoes. I'm ready with the potato and rod number 1.
What can I do? Klaus asked.
You can start studying for the comprehensive exam, of course, Violet said. I can possibly read all of Duncan's notes in just one night. While Sonny and I make the staples, you need to read Duncan and Isadora's notebooks, memorize the measurements from Mrs. Bass's class, and teach me all of Mr. Remora's stories.
Roger, Klaus said. As you probably know, the middle Baudelaire was not referring to anybody named Roger. He was saying a man's name to indicate that he understood what Violet had said and would act accordingly. And over the course of the next 2 hours, that's exactly what he did. While Sonny used her noisy shoes to keep the crab in the corner and Violet used the potato as a toe and the crab's claws as clean cutters, Klaus used the Quagmire notebooks to study for the comprehensive exams, and everything worked the way it should. Sonny tapped her shoes so noisily that the crab remained trapped. Violet was so quick with the potato and metal rods as soon as they were snipped into staple-sized pieces. And Klaus, although he had to squint because Duncan was using his glasses, read Isadora's measuring notes so carefully that before long he had memorized the length, width, and depth of just about everything. Violet, ask me the measurements of the navy blue scarf, Klaus said, turning the notebook over so he couldn't peek. Violet yanked the potato away just in time, and the crab snipped off another bit of the metal rods.
What are the measurements of the navy blue scarf? She asked.
2 decimeters long, Klaus recited, 9 centimeters wide, and 4 millimeters thick. It's boring, but it's correct. Sonny, ask me the measurements of the bar of deodorant soap. The crab saw an opportunity to leave the corner, but Sunny was too quick for it. Shop? Sunny quizzed Klaus, tapping her tiny, noisy shoes until the crab retreated. 8 centimeters by 8 centimeters by 8 centimeters, Klaus said promptly. That one's easy. You're doing great, you two. I bet that crab's going to be almost as tired as we are.
No, Violet said. He's not done. He's done. Let him go, Sonny. We have all the staple size pieces we need. I'm glad the part of the staple making process is over. It's very nerve-wracking to tease a crab.
What's next? Klaus said as the crab scurried away for the most frightening moments of his life.
Next, you teach me Mr. Remora's stories, Violet said, while Sonny and I bend these little bits of metal into the proper staple.
Chablon, Sonny said, which meant something like, how are we going to do that? Which is curious. How are we going to do that, Violet? Just break it down for me, sis. I don't know. I don't know what's going on.
Watch, Violet said, and Sonny watched.
While Klaus closed Isadora's black notebook and began paging through Duncan's dark green one, Violet took the glob of cream spinach and mixed it with a few pieces of stray hay and dusted it until it was a sticky, gluey mess. Then she placed this mess on the sticky end of the fork and stuck it in one of the bales of hay so that the handle end of the fork hung over the side. She blew on the cream spinach, straw, hay, and dust mixture until it hardened.
I always thought that Prufrock Prep's cream spinach was awfully sticky, Violet explained, and then I realized it could be used as glue. And now we have a perfect method of making those tiny strips into staples. See, if I lay a strip across the handle of the fork, a tiny part of the strip hangs off each of the sides. Those are the parts that will go inside the paper when it's a staple. If I take off my noisy shoes, and here Violet paused to take off her noisy shoes, and use the metal ends to tap on the strips, they'll bend around the handle of the fork and turn into staples. See?
Giba! Sonny shrieked. She meant, you're a genius, but what can I do to help?
You can keep your noisy shoes on your feet, Violet replied, and keep the crabs away from us. And Klaus, you start summarizing stories.
Roger, Sonny said.
Roger,
Klaus said. Once again, neither of them were referring to Roger. They meant once again that they understood what Violet had said and would act accordingly, and all three Baudelaires acted accordingly for the rest of the night. Violet tapped away at the metal strips, and Klaus read out loud from Duncan's notebook, and Sonny stomped her noisy shoes. Soon the Baudelaires had a pile of homemade staples on the floor, the details of Mr. Remora's stories in their brains, and not a single crab bothered them in the shack. And even with the threat of Coach Genghis hovering over them, the evening actually began to feel rather cozy. It reminded the Baudelaires of evenings they had spent with their parents alive in one of the living rooms in the Baudelaire mansion. Violet would often be tinkering away at some invention, while Klaus would often be reading and sharing the information he was learning, and Sonny would often be making loud noises. Of course, Violet was never tinkering frantically at an invention that would save their lives, Klaus was never reading something so boring, and Sonny was never making loud noises to scare crabs. But nevertheless, as the night wore on, Baudelaires felt almost at home in the orphan shack. When the sun began to lighten with the first rays of dawn, the Baudelaires began to feel a certain thrill that was quite different from the thrill of being in disguise. It was the thrill that I have never felt in my life. It was a thrill that the Baudelaires did not feel very often. But as the morning sun began to shine, the Baudelaire orphans felt the thrill of thinking your plan might actually work after all, and that perhaps they would eventually be as safe and happy as the evenings they remembered. And that is where we will end for today. And the feeling with which the author was describing is called hope. There's a Greek myth about Pandora's box, which, by the way, it wasn't a literal box. It was an urn. It's like a vase. There we go. So, inside of it, if memory serves, correct me if I'm wrong, Pandora was the daughter of Hephaestus. Hephaestus is the god of the forge, so he creates weapons, shields, magical items, enchanted objects, weapons of war, stuff like that. His daughter was, he considered to be his finest creation. And Zeus commissioned him. He said, I want you to gather all the evil and the darkness in the world and put it in this urn and make sure nobody touches it. And inside of it, Hephaestus was quite successful. He was able to put all the darkness and negativity in the world in this urn. And because Zeus was a petty creature and wanted to see the folly of what would happen if it were to be opened, if memory serves me correctly, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, but because of Pandora's overly stimulated curiosity, she then opens it, and all of the evil and darkness in the world pours out, right? And it floods everything. All the darkness and evil is out in the world and is affecting people. But at the bottom of that urn, out of Pandora's box, is a little spirit. She said, I am the spirit of hope. I am everlasting. I cannot be easily defeated. So no matter if there is darkness or evil or negativity in the world, there will always be hope. We will soon find out that sometimes hope for the Baudelaire orphans is not enough. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.